next step, then his decision would become final, and then you can move forward with advancing the list.
Okay, so 10 days from the 15th, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so essentially on the 25th, 10 business days or 10 calendar days?
It doesn't specify, so when it doesn't call that out, then it's 10 calendar days. So I agree, it's the 25th.
Okay.
This Monday.
All right, so next Monday, if we have not heard back from that officer, we can go ahead and advance those names. The next step in that process would be for council to review the 3 names, the recommended names that we are putting forward as the interview committee, and then they can choose to interview those people if they would like, or whatever information gathering methods they would like to undertake to choose. And then they ultimately vote, I believe, on who they would like to promote. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Falco and Amy, if I can jump in a moment. I sent this to Steve Corbel last night. We have a right to know request from one of the other candidates asking about, you all have probably heard about this, asking for individual scores being broken down. I know Falco's aware that he was going to file right to know. He has, as of yesterday. I sent it to Steve Corbel, the town solicitor, for an opinion. I don't know if that would hold up anything you folks might want to do or not.
I don't think that it will. I would take the position that there are several exceptions that would safeguard that information, but obviously that's up to the town solicitor in how he responds. But if it's possible to respond within the first 5 business days, then that definitely would not really impact anything. So it depends on whether you're going to need an extension to respond and so forth.
Okay.
But again, that should not affect anything because it's simply a right to know request. It doesn't challenge the scores themselves.
I had a question, and I haven't been involved in this in any level of detail, but can you comment on the general tone of our response? Was it, hey, yeah, we did everything we were supposed to do, or were there any sort of acknowledged and for lack of a better word, variances or deficiencies in the way that we had proceeded in this process?
Yeah, we don't want to get into the details of the decision, although you're definitely, I think it's proper for you as a board member to be able to review that decision. But just from a public standpoint, the board found that there was no basis presented to change the scores. So
okay,
the board basically,
that's the main thing I wanted to know. That's fine.
Yeah.
Now, one question regarding the right to know, and maybe I'm getting too far into the weeds. Falco, feel free to tell me I am. I have a general idea of where I think the right to know request will end up for the one officer. But depending on what is provided to him, would he then have the ability to request a hearing as well?
My position would be no,
Okay.
that time has passed.
Okay.
There has to be some finality to the list.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, then I'm comfortable with us moving on, because I have a pretty clear idea from talking to Steve Corbel, the gist of what that response will most likely be, but we just have to fine tune it, I think. Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions about the sergeant's promotional process? Okay, there was a sub-bullet on the agenda, potential changes to section 208. Let me pull that up. So 208, I thought 208 was
The list of
specific.
eligibles.
Yeah, but I thought that was specific to new officers. Police appointments, 201 advertisement qualifications, 203, 204. Yeah, I think 208 is for new officers. Does anyone else have it up and can confirm that?
Um,
Yeah, I'm almost certain it is because,
Uh.
Go ahead, Falco.
No, I agree with you. I believe that is the section dealing with new hires.
Okay. Well, regardless, I think what we meant to put on the agenda, and that's my fault, I didn't catch this prior, but under the promotion, so I think it would be 303, we were talking about, do we want to, for the future, change any process, any part of the process for the sergeant promotions? So let me just kind of highlight what it says now. Rule 3, police promotions, written and oral examinations, scoring, anyone who obtains a 70% or more in both components shall be included on the eligibility list. They are scored on the basis of 100%. The composite score shall be 70% written, 30% oral. Top 3 names may be considered for selection by council, and any one of the top 3 candidates may be selected by council. There's a medical examination. And then it goes into hearing. So I think what we had thrown out there was, would we want to adjust any part of that? Specifically, I think we were talking about the 70-30.
I think we should. I think we should change the process to just so that we can avoid what happened this time. And to make it more transparent, as they say, and that way it'll have a harder time questioning the process.
Okay, yeah, I know, Matt, last time you had recommended a ranking versus a score, that the interviewers agree on a ranking, and then, maybe if we need to get it to a number to match with the numerical nature of the written score, maybe the top person gets 100, the next person gets 95, something to that effect.
That's right. That's exactly what I said. So that way, because when you're writing down scores, it's kind of arbitrary to a certain extent, but you have, each person has a sense of who did better than another person. Maybe they can quantify it in some way or another. It's hard to do that with a number, but if you all have a consensus on who your number 1 candidate is and all the way to the list, and then you assign 100% to the number 1 person, 95 to the second person, 90 to the third person, then that's like, hey, this is the way it is. There's nothing arbitrary about that. And you add that into your multiplier, and now you have your score.
And what do you think about the 70-30? 70% written is what it is today, 30% interview, oral.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think that we've seen that 30% oral can have an impact on the list. And so it's, the personnel board's input is significant, and that people should take both seriously. They should take the test seriously, and they should take the oral examination seriously.
Yeah, I guess it's unfortunate Matt couldn't make it, but my perspective would be, I would like to see a heavier weight on the oral interview portion of it, only because I think, especially at this level, we're looking for more leadership skills and less ability to memorize and regurgitate all of the facts and laws and all the stuff that was on the written test. So it's sort of, for a new officer, they don't necessarily have that as high of a need for the communication or the soft skills as we would for a sergeant. So I would be in favor. I'm okay with your suggestion, Matt. I think that takes a lot of the subjectivity out of the rankings. I'm sorry, out of the ratings to do rankings instead. And I would like to see at least 60% written and at least 40% for the interview.
And I don't have a problem with 40% either.
Okay. Falco, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously we want it to be a transparent process. We want it to be easy to execute, easy to explain. Having lived with us through the difficulties we've encountered in this process, what are your thoughts on changing it that way?
Well, definitely.
Did we lose Falco?
I just wanted to make
He was
sure that I was
muted, and
unmuted.
then-
I'm sorry. Yeah,
It's okay.
that's okay. Definitely, in terms of changing the 70-30 to 60-40, I think you articulated a very valid reason in terms of comparison with new hires and what you're potentially looking for in a promotional position. In terms of the process of how it's factored in or scored or ranked, part of, I guess, my thought process is whether that is more of an internal operational procedure of the personnel board as opposed to something that needs to be memorialized in the ordinance itself. The ordinance is kind of the skeleton, so to speak, that gives you the parameters that you operate under as the board, but then you as the board can adopt guidelines in terms of how you're then going to implement the ordinance. So I'm not sure that we want to drill down into those kinds of specifics in the ordinance. I would expect that there are many other ordinances in the town where it gives parameters and then the administration in implementing those ordinances has a process that they of how they do that. And it's kind of the same concept as it applies to the personnel board.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. So
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about if we're talking about different percentages than what's in the ordinance, how does that not require a change to the ordinance?
I think he's saying
Oh, it
that
would.
part
That-
would.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'm
I think
saying is when we're talking then about how we implement that 70-30, the process that the board itself goes through in terms of analyzing the scores of the members who have interviewed the candidates and so forth, that's what I'm saying becomes more administrative in how you're implementing what's in the ordinance. But yes, because the ordinance right now says clearly 70-30, so that percentage, if you're going to change it, would have to be done by an ordinance.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective, Falco. I hadn't really realized that, but it's not spelled out in the ordinance how we get to that numerical score, just that we come up with a numerical score on the oral interview. So I think that's important that we don't need to memorialize that in writing. And just by way of context,
Amy, excuse me, Amy, I'm not suggesting not putting it in writing because we do want to use the word transparent, but we want to make sure that we're operating uniformly from one exam to the next exam to the next exam. So that administrative guidelines or regulations that the board is going to operate under should be something that we put in writing. It's just that it would be something the board would have internally then, not through an ordinance that council would have to adopt.
got it. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Bob, Chief Hawk, anyone else, any perspective on either of those two things we were just discussing for the sergeant's exam?
Yes. I just want to be clear that we would be, like, if there's any adjustment, and I need to call this up so I can see it. I'm just wanting to be sure that I have have it right, what we will be taking to the council and what we won't.
I think it's really just section singular 303. Any applicant who obtains 70% or more shall be included. Both written and oral examinations shall be scored on a basis of 100%. The composite score, here's the one sentence that would change. The composite score shall be 70% of the written score plus 30% of the oral score. And by the way, just by way of context, because I can never remember this either, but for new hires today, the weighting is 60% written, 40% oral. So it's crazy to me that we give more weighting to the oral interview for a new hire than we do for a sergeant promotion. So as Falco, I think, alluded to, we're
Yes.
just essentially matching the two now.
Yes,
if we make-
okay. Okay,
I think we're on the right track.
yep, I agree.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, and so
No.
on the discussion, that we were having last week, or sorry, last month about this, I may have misunderstood, but my thoughts along these lines were even more emphasizing the oral component, because to me, if you're a tiny bit above the threshold of knowing enough to pass the written exam, I don't think it matters nearly as much as whether you have leadership and communication skills as demonstrated in an oral interview. And I think that, I mean, not what we're talking about right now, but I think communication skills are equally as important for officers. As I mentioned before, they're just different. They're communicating with the community instead of communicating as a leader. And what we had talked about, at least what my understanding of where the discussion was going, was to have the written part subsumed inside the overall discussion about the ranking, and the ranking being based on a consensus, that we can have options of what if we can't generate a consensus. We kind of maybe default back to this more traditional, scoring based approach. But at the end of the day, the folks on the personnel board talk about who should be the top, the second, and the third person who goes to council, and that those three people are the end of the discussion, kind of. And then maybe we rank the rest of the people for the sake of feedback, but it really dramatically simplifies things, and it emphasizes that interview process, aside from just maybe confirming that the people are above the pass-fail threshold for the written exam. It emphasizes the interview component as the most important piece. And I mean, as far as the ranking system to determine the percentage for the interview, I had concerns about, because it actually hamstrings the interview considerably, and it forces a sort of a rank of one higher point in the ranking of the interviewees as having a certain number of points. What if that person who was fourth was like dramatically lower than the person who was third, and a 10-point increment in the interview score really doesn't reflect the fact that they should actually be a -10, So I was really reluctant to kind of shoehorn it into a forced ranking based approach for the interview side, unless the whole thing was based on basically everybody's saying, we're just going to decide on the ranking. We're not just deciding on the ranking for the interview component. We're just deciding on the ranking period.
That's a good point. So you said much more eloquently that in that first part, why I think the interview process is just as, or maybe even more important. So I agree with that part. So we're raising it from 30 to 40%. I mean, honestly, I could go 50-50, but
Yeah, I would say 50,
No.
52, but if we're just ranking them overall and that's the end of it, it doesn't matter what the percentage is. We can talk about the percentage as a backup, a fallback in case we can't generate a consensus, and maybe 60, 40, 50, 50. We're not trying to do that as our plan A anyhow, if we do this consensus-based approach. But again, I mean, that's what I thought we were talking about. If folks had second thoughts on that approach, or that wasn't what I should have understood, that's fine. But at the very least, when I thought I understood it, I thought it was a good idea, but I still actually do. So for whatever that's worth.
so let me just clarify. Are you suggesting that the interview committee would take into account the written scores and then
Yeah.
rank?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just, you could either look at it as we're just confirming that the people have a pass score. They have a score that's high enough to pass on the written part. And if they don't, then we have some really good explanation as to why that's okay. Or why that's preferable. But I think that, passing, I think, is a minimum requirement, I would think.
Yeah, 70%, I think, is the passing minimum. Well, wow, that's really different.
Then there's no people arguing about what was my percentage unless we weren't able to generate a consensus.
I just wonder if, historically, they've done the written, they've done the oral, they've combined the two. I don't know what the officer's perspective would be on, like, they want so much information. They wanted to know all their written scores and the breakdown of those. They wanted to know all their oral scores and that's
And to me, it was interesting. They didn't ask for, at least as far as I was aware, they didn't ask for the informal feedback about what can I do better to be more effective in my interview? What can I do better to be XYZ? Like, there's a formal complaint process, but what I would hope they would look for is how can I, more effectively address these if I apply next time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that would raise some eyebrows, I think. I don't know. What do other people think? That's an interesting suggestion to fold in the written process and just take that into account. And then ultimately it's up to the interview committee to come up with 3 top names. Chief Hawk, what do you think? You probably know them the best.
That's certainly would be a new perspective, or, an idea that I don't believe they've considered here for my time here, where, if I understand it right, so long as you pass, then is everyone maybe, if it for some reason comes into play down the road, so be it, but that everybody then that passes is presented to the interview panel, and that's whenever the top group is established, I think, is what Brian's suggesting, maybe.
Right.
I might have oversimplified that, but
No, that's it.
yeah. I mean, I would say the only, well, maybe not the only, but would, Falco might be able to weigh in. Would that support the civil service process? Could we do something like that if the town chose to? I mean, that interview is, and Amy and I, we've probably talked about it in previous personnel board meetings where, if you're trying to isolate your truly best candidates for a supervisory role, is that memorization of that written portion as important as it might be for a new hire, when you're trying to identify who really has the skills to be a supervisor, more so than the other candidates. That interview is an important part of it. I probably just talked in circles, but, I think the idea has merit.
Yeah, I think what we probably should do, it's a little difficult to wrap your head around it when we have a discussion at a meeting like this. Maybe if we start putting something in draft form and then have an ability to kind of make adjustments to the written draft and, see exactly where the majority of the board is going, that might be easier to weigh in. I think definitely, though, at least the way it's structured right now, there still has to be some level of scoring in the oral exam that establishes that you've met the 70% pass rate, so to speak. and then from there, based on the perception from the interviews, you get into the concept of the ranking based on those oral exams. And then after you've established that, then you fold that into the composite score with the written exam once you've established the numbers coming out of the oral exam. I think that's what I'm hearing, but I'm not, it's kind of difficult, again, a lot of moving parts, to comment without having something in writing that we can refer to and adjust.
I can take a crack at putting it down in writing, just
Yeah,
as a starting point.
I've sort of experienced what Brian's talking about in my past life, where we were looking as an interview committee at candidates who maybe we interviewed the top 12 people or 13 people from that passed a test, and then rank those people after the fact. And we had situations where what would be number 12 ends up 2 or 3 or even 1, only because we picked up something in an interview that we thought would make a good officer for the department, as opposed to somebody who could or couldn't take a test. So I have some experience at it. I've seen it work and work well. I guess my question, this might be more to Ryan. Knowing the makeup of the group people that we have here, I'm not as concerned about new hires if we went that route for new hires, because it is what it is. But any promotional kinds of things, how much pushback do you think we would get immediately? Because it becomes very subjective at that point.
I believe you and I probably know that answer, Bob.
Just seeing what we're getting with this.
Right. Yeah, I would say enough said, as they say.
Yeah.
That would be my concern too, is that it lends itself a little bit less to the perception of objectivity, because the written one is like 100% objective, right? So if at least 50 or 60% is that objective side, and then there's some percentage that's subjective because people are making opinions about you during a hour-long interview, and I don't think there's anything to be done about that. We made it as objective as possible, but I do hesitate to just totally turn it on its head. Maybe we do this in stages, like we up the percentage of the oral interview, we agree that we're going to do consensus rankings going forward versus individual scores. Like, we do this in steps versus just, I don't know.
Well, I like Brian's suggestion. I need more information to see from different areas to see to make a better decision. The only objection I would have to it is that what you just raised is the subjectivity. And I would recommend that we put together criteria that we're looking for each officer or for the promotion, and put that out. So like it's standing, this is what you need. This is what the promotion board is going to look for, so that officers have that to gear their lives off on a daily basis, so that they can live up to those standards I did that as a commanding officer of SEAL Unit 18. I told each rank what I was looking for them, and I used that as a basis for evaluating their performance.
Yeah.
I think that's an equitable way of doing it.
And I think, as I recall, Matt, one of the interviewees asked kind of what were we looking for? And you said we've got these questions divided into these, I forget how many there were, 5 or 6 categories, and you read out the category, like that would essentially be, we've decided that these are the things that are important to us, and here they are. And the questions are all geared towards discerning how good you might be at leadership, for example, or communication, or I forget what the categories were now, but
Yeah, but leadership is a pretty broad category. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is that we can be more specific on what it is that we're really looking for it within each category.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that helps in the short and medium terms as far as just rolling out the continuous improvement and people, trying to, gear their self-improvement efforts towards the goals that they have career-wise that get them in position for these kinds of promotions. And it makes the force better too, because, if you're saying, here's what we expect, and it's just good stuff, it just helps everybody.
Exactly.
Mark, we haven't heard from you. Any thoughts on this?
Amy, sorry, I'm in the office today. That's why I'm blacked out. I'm trying to be
Oh,
quiet.
No worries.
I had to return to the office. Highmark doesn't allow video cameras, so I'm trying to be as quiet as possible. Sorry about that.
No
If
problem.
you need to, you can just chat. You can just send net messages in chat too.
Yeah, that's a good
Totally
idea.
on the down low.
I don't even see that function. I don't
So
even
if you
see
look down at the bottom, there should be an assortment of icons, and I have mute, stop video, participants, and then chat. If you click on that, it'll open a window on the right. You can type messages to everyone or to individuals.
Yeah, I don't see that option. I see mute, start video, share content, and participants. That's it.
And then there should be a ellipsis with more, and you hit that, it'll probably be in the ellipsis.
Oh, got it. Yep.
Nice.
Shared tech support. Perfect. Okay. Well, so it sounds like we want to sort of table this. And by the way, this one isn't really time sensitive. The best time to talk about improving a process is right after you've lived through the process. So I don't want to lose track of this, but not like we're going to be generating a new list for sergeant promotions anytime soon. So maybe we table this. We turn our attention to the selecting new officers, because hopefully that will be coming up soon. Speaking of which, there were 2 items that I sent out. I think it was like a week after we met last time. One of them was the report that let me think back. I think it was about a year ago. Matt and Chaz and I interviewed several police officers and members of the police force, including the support staff and sergeants, detectives, etc. So did everyone have a chance to take a look at that? And are there any questions about what was in there? I think Mark and Brian would have been the ones who hadn't seen it previously.
Yeah, I looked at it in considerable detail.
Okay.
I thought it was really helpful. I mean, the thing that I thought that was really great, especially, was the fact that it seemed to have a positive impact on them, on folks just asking what their perspectives were. I mean, that's one of the classic ways to drive engagement. And a lot of the ideas were very constructive and very helpful, and things to consider. And there's some things that I would say, if you took the citizen perspective on some of those, one of the things in particular, I don't know if we want to talk about that now, but I think there's a different emphasis that could result, but I think it was really a good thing. When we get to a point of talking about which of them to focus on, I think it's, we can talk about those details. What was the goal of bringing that up right now? Did you want to dive into the details of the individual suggestions, or
I just wanted to make sure. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, it seems like you just want to make sure we saw it. Is that the intent?
Yeah. I mean, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. We've had a lot of people leaving, joining, so we're all just sort of level setting, and it was a huge amount of work, and so I wanted to make sure it didn't get lost. It a lot of good information. Chaz did a nice job summarizing it. So, yeah, just make sure we're all starting from the same place of information. Um, Speaking of that, the other thing I sent out was it was really just my sort of brain dump around questions for the process. So that was one of my challenges when I first joined the board, was like, nothing was in writing. And again, there's more questions here than there are answers, but it sort of highlights here's what's in writing now, here's what we should consider as we think about the selection process. And this is probably a question for Bob, and I see he just stepped away, but wanted to ask, like, as we look at the selection process for new officers, that's our next order of business, to make sure that we have some agreement about how we want to proceed with that. What is our timing there? Does anyone know? Are we looking to hire a new officer soon? Do we need approval from council to do that? What would the steps be? Like I said, this is a question for Bob, and he just stepped away. So
My guess is the budget will drive a lot of that, just at the risk of speaking out of turn.
yeah,
But the other thing, as far as you having this up, I did want to suggest we maybe talk about that successful completion of basic police training question there. And Chief Hawk, I did want to ask you about, and this is a kind of a maybe strangely specific justification, but for example, that guy who was interested in potentially becoming a police officer from the Citizens Police Academy, we almost literally, you guys almost literally recruited the guy from, as a result of the great presentations you guys had done. Would you suggest any modifications to this, given the interest of somebody like that? So, was he? I didn't get his story. Was he a college graduate? Would it matter if we said, hey, yeah, we could even talk about helping, sponsoring you for the basic training stuff, because not many people just do that, right? Because it really encourages people who are maybe in other career fields who potentially have extremely relevant life experiences or just personality traits to consider a career path that they might not otherwise have considered, and that would enormously benefit the town.
So, yeah, Brian, I believe he didn't give me a whole lot of his background, but that particular gentleman sounds like he's involved with either the Air National Guard or the Air Force Reserve. But we've talked in previous ones, and we can catch you up probably in previous about kind of tweaking or changing the requirements. And there's been different things floated. I think Matt Shipley spoke previously, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Matt, you can jump in, about adding a military background component to requirements, or as an alternative to the 4-year degree. We've also talked about going back to like what they probably did prior to me even getting in this business, and so I've seen some agencies do that recently, where you take that requirement that they have that Act 120 training, that police academy already, and you maybe sunset that requirement, just take it out altogether, with to maybe open the field of candidates up to folks who might not, like you said, might not have their traditional college criminology or criminal justice background, but might be interested and have not went to an academy. Whereas if they score well enough and they score in that top group, and council, they go through the process and council likes them, then maybe the town would extend them a conditional offer of employment and sponsor them, pay their salary, some sort of, maybe not the full first year salary, but whatever the town decides is appropriate, and pay to send them to the Allegheny County Police Academy, or who else does one locally? There are multiple options there. Allegheny County, of course, right here, North Park, is in the town, and the town could cover the cost and put them through the academy. And so long as they graduated, then they would become a full-time officer for the town. I guess there would have to be some stipulation that conditional officer or offer would probably have to spell out that if they failed out of that police academy, though, that they would then be, disqualified from the position, so that the town's not stuck with I hate to say it that way, but a civilian employee then that, couldn't make it through a police academy. But it is an option. And that's the long-winded answer to, I think, to part of your question. It is an option, and I've seen other agencies, I think in the South Hills, Mount Lebanon, or Upper St. Clair are doing it. The larger agencies obviously can afford to do it, like the sheriff's office, the city of Pittsburgh, where they hire you and then they put you through. Would certainly broaden our field of candidates, I would think. And I hear from other agencies that have been hiring there are just precious few candidates these days that are coming forward and taking these police tests.
And so and I think this is consistent with a chat comment. We did add that military waiver for the college degree, I thought, and obviously we could add to it or supplement it. I think that's what we approved last month, right?
Right, we did approve some changes, so I'm probably confusing people by sending out my year-old notes here, but
no, that's why, I'm sorry, that's why I focused on that one piece instead of those other pieces. Because we did not change this basic police training requirement. And if you did want to have that, which I actually agree with, as a potential waiver, not to say that it's always waived, but under special circumstances, blah, 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 that might be a justification for adding some flexibility to that provision.
Yeah. I think we had talked about, so the what is the Act 120, I think it's called, training. We had talked in the past, I believe I can't remember the time commitment and the monetary commitment of that. It's not as high as I thought it would be, but it's certainly a commitment. To Chief Hawk's point, if someone was interested, it's something that the town could consider sponsoring.
Remember the order of magnitude? Was it 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000?
Chief Hawk?
The time commitment, it's probably full-time for 6 or 7 months, I believe, these days. To get from
That's
beginning.
A lot of time.
Yeah, it is. It really is. There's a lot of training that goes into it. And as far as cost, we could certainly get a hard number, but I'm going to ballpark it, probably $5,000-ish. The town would have to foot the bill for the cost of that. For 6 months of training, all things considered, that's probably not too bad. But I could lock down a number from Allegheny County if and when we need it for, sure.
Yeah. And I think part of what we didn't know was, it used to be that you open up a position, you had 30 people applying. Now, who knows what the applicant pool looks like? I don't know. It'd be interesting. I wish Matt Lucas could be on, because he might have more of a perspective on how many applicants have been, like the size of the pool recently. But that is something that we had talked about in the past, Brian, is maybe sponsoring them or otherwise making it more accessible for people to become a police officer.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, whereas when I started, you would have 300 people show up for a McCandless police test. We'd probably easily get under 50. We might only get 25 or 30. That might even be generous these days. I mean, Franklin Park just went through it, and I forget now, they might have had like 13 candidates take the test and only like 3 pass it. I mean, there are a lot of challenges, from things that, people were doing in their, that police departments are finding in their background on social media and such these days that maybe wasn't an option to get in trouble years ago. And it's eliminating them from contention because of something maybe they did or posted in the past, to, as you all know, the social unrest, and, it's not necessarily an attractive profession at this time. We have a lot of challenges, and I think that's, part of the reason why we're getting, the pool of candidates is getting cut down.
Yep.
Yeah, we wouldn't be committing to doing it if we just made it an option, right? To support people for that. We could just make it sufficiently flexible that it was something that was able to be considered in the future, where it currently isn't. It's excluded, I'm pretty sure.
So what would that look like in the ordinance? We would basically just say, I'm trying to find the part. Be a person, so it's 202E, be a person who has successfully
Right.
completed basic police training course or is willing to complete or something like, we'd have to change the verbiage there.
Well, I mean, so I wouldn't put it in that first main sentence, because if you say, you know, has completed or is willing, then you're equating the people who have it with the people who are willing. And I would say, you know, almost like a second sentence, it's like, in special circumstances, you know, it's possible to consider people who have not done this, you know, and we'd have to get some words from the solicitor, you know, the lawyer person to make sure we didn't trip over ourselves there, but
Yeah,
I would not want to equate, you know, somebody who already had that with somebody who didn't.
right,
That's my
right.
only point.
So maybe we say something to the effect of, and Falco can help us with the verbiage, but I like that. In special circumstances, the town may consider sponsoring individuals for this training or something to that effect, like,
Right.
okay.
Well, this is Falco. In E, doesn't it kind of address that or comes at it by saying commits to taking the certification exam?
Well, so the course is the time commitment, right? I mean, the time and the money commitment. So it insists on the course, which I think is the barrier that we're trying to alleviate.
And I believe
I
that, I'm sorry, maybe go ahead.
Either way, we need them to take the course. I think we're just saying they could apply before they take the course, but that's a good point, Falco. Either successfully completed or commits to taking the examination.
I
So-
believe the exam they're referencing there, these officers these days, even if they have the academy training under their belt and they passed it before they are hired with another agency full-time, I believe now the requirement is that they have to take a certification exam again on top of the academy. That's probably what I believe that's referencing there. I'm
Okay.
not certain. Where they have to agree that they have to take and pass that exam again prior to employment with us.
So someone who completes the training, the completion of it is the taking and passing of the exam. Isn't that still the case?
I believe beyond, Falco, I'll research this, but I believe beyond the actual passing of the academy, officers that want to hire full-time in another agency then have to go take through the MPOETC, MOPECT, as we call them, the Municipal Police Officers Training Commission. They have to retake an exam that shows that they didn't, I guess, that their skills are still sharp. Kind of like, I don't know, maybe like an SAT or something for cops. I mean, that's a bad example, but you know. I'll have to reread that ordinance too. I just think that, yeah. And there are other agencies, like I said, I could probably track down some that their requirements, I think, just exclude that as a requirement, you know, in a way to show to folks, okay, you can take our test without having the academy, you know, and we'll still consider you just by not listing it as a requirement.
Okay. I'm just looking at the clock here. I know we want to keep it to an hour. So this is good conversation. Oh, Bob, you're back. Okay. So quick question. Any thoughts on potential timing for adding new officer positions? Has this been something council has discussed? Not yet, not recently.
The budget is calling for officers to be replaced. We're trying to look at a balance between officers being replaced, other types of positions that may free up officers' time in order to be able to focus on efforts. So the budget does call for hirings to occur. We are in a position that we could fill at least one immediately, if not two, very shortly after the first of the year. So any time that we can get this moving, we're good to go.
Has there been a formal request by town council for the board to conduct the entry-level examinations?
No,
Because usually if you're talking about a civil service commission or a personnel board, they just don't go out on their own and start testing. They receive a request from the hiring agency that we need a list of eligibles, and that's what activates the beginning of the personnel board's testing process. So my concern is that the town council is in need of new hires, hasn't made the request, and then I know we've been going through various alliterations of the ordinance and the eligibility requirements, and that needs to be in place before we can begin testing. So, I just feel like we're still a good month to month and a half out before we even have the ordinance in place to be able to start the testing.
Carolyn, this is more for you. I think it would be appropriate for us to probably incorporate that discussion when we review the police budget in, well,
Okay.
maybe Monday night.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know in the last 2 years, definitely council talked about the need for hiring, but it keeps kind of getting pushed back. So hopefully, yeah, we can talk about it coming up.
Yeah, so
Good.
we can make that happen.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Falco's right. We need to button down the ordinance before we start on the search
Yeah.
process too. So,
Right.
Yeah.
okay, good. All right, in the minute we have left, Police Academy community engagement updates. Chief Hawk, I'm guessing that's you.
Okay. Police Academy, Amy and Brian can jump in here. I think tomorrow we're going to meet at, I believe it's week 6 out of 8. We're going to meet for a tour of the 911 center. I'm looking forward to. Then there'll be 2 more weeks in addition to that. CPR on week 7. I'm going to try to certify everybody for 2 years in CPR and stop the bleed, maybe first aid. Week 8 will be SIMTAC scenarios. That ought to be a whole lot of fun, use of force and firearm safety talk. And hopefully maybe some sort of thing on a council meeting to follow where we graduate you all, if you all pass. And
we have a good interview too.
right,
Yeah.
right. Community engagement. I just did a coffee with cops with Ross Township a couple of Fridays ago down at the block at Northway. We're always talking with Ross because they have a sergeant there that organizes some of these community engagement events, and I think we work well together, our 2 agencies. We're always looking for opportunities to engage the community. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think if we have anything on the immediate horizon, and nothing is striking me. So yeah, for now, that's what I got as far as those go.
Okay. Thank you. So for action items, I have Brian's going to take a crack at trying to revise the ordinance for the sergeant selection process to put some verbiage in there that we can all react to. I think it's a good point. When you see something, it's easier to react than just having a discussion. I think. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt. Or who was that?
I thought Matt said something about it. He was going to say something else. But
Okay.
no worries.
And then regarding the new hire section of the ordinance, I don't know that we have concrete action items there. A lot of good discussion, but did anyone have any takeaways that I missed? No.
If we had a draft of the flexibility language for the academy piece, that would be again a good starting point for a discussion about that, because it seemed like there was interest in some flexibility there.
I can take a crack at that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else that we need to discuss today? Our next meeting, sorry, let me leave that question out there before I go on.
I wanted to ask, there was some discussion about a call analysis of the call history to help guide kind of strategic hiring, whatever. I don't know, there's been a lot going on, so that might not have been possible, but if it seems like that's helpful in general. There's the possibility of getting that.
Is that something you remember talking about, Chief Hawk?
We can certainly try to nail down. I think we looked a while ago. Carolyn was down here. That might have been 6 months or so ago. Was it specifically about maybe mental health calls or something like that? I guess it would depend on what types of breakdown you folks would want to see and what kind of period we're talking about. We could certainly try to break down calls by types of, incidents and such. Do we know what you guys would want to see?
Yeah,
Personally, I would think not just calls, but
I think it's. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, how are the officers and the sergeants and detectives, for that matter, spending their time? Like, what, I know I remember discussing, for example, that the cybersecurity types of issues are taking up more time than anyone ever imagined they would. So, but that might be one call that's taking 20 hours versus, a traffic call takes 15 minutes or something. So I'm not sure call analysis would show us the full picture is what I'm saying. Is there a way to kind of look at where people are?
Time per call or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll talk with our secretary and see what's possible as far as if we can track man hours spent on calls. Might be difficult to nail down. There's a lot of follow-up that goes on by the officers where, they're not documenting the follow-up. They're just documenting it in the report, what they did, maybe not how much time they spent on it, but I'll talk to the secretary and see if that kind of thing, how trackable that is.
Okay. All right.
We did.
Go ahead.
We had an intern do some analysis this past spring. I just sent it back to Chief for him to double check. If we think that that's a good starting point, we'll get that out to you. But we did start some of that analysis.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, Nick, when are we meeting next? Did we say the third Wednesday? So that would be November 17th?
November 17th at 9:38, correct.
Okay. All right. Any other orders of business? Sorry, we ran over today. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes. I
All right,
motion to
second. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Bye.
All right.